Welcome to the Walter Bosley channel. This is Walter Bosley, and I'm really energized to be here today telling you about the new book that I just received from the printer. And that is a book that my label is publishing, of course, and it is the second book in the Wonder of the Worlds trilogy by Sesh Heri, titled Metamorphosis. It is what I like to call Act 2 of the trilogy. But I want to tell you about this book because the actual printing is it's beautiful. It's just so nice. It is a cover design that I did myself. As you know, I'm a publisher and I'm kind of a one-man show, and I really enjoy doing book covers. So whether you like my book covers or not, I like them, and I really enjoy doing them. As I said, I just got my first copy of the reissue of this book. I had originally published this book several years ago, before Sesh Heri went on kind of a personal sabbatical away from publishing, away from being public with his ideas. And since we are, as I announced late last year, re-releasing the books I've already published in preparation for publishing a bunch of new material that he has written over the last few years while he's been gone. This is a very exciting volume here. And before I go on and on about why you really should read this book, I'm going to kind of let the book itself make a pitch to you. Now, you're looking at the graphic of the front cover art, and the statue you see on there in front of the rainbow beams. Well, that statue was one of many just like it, fashioned for the 1915 Pan-Pacific Exposition in San Francisco that year, celebrating the opening of the Panama Canal. Now, San Diego had an exposition, a sister exposition, at the same time, for the same reason, and the grounds of that exposition pretty much became the Balboa Park that we know today. But this one is from the San Francisco exposition. Now, the rainbow beams that you see behind the statue on the front cover, what that is that's taken from an artistic depiction of a display called the scintillator. Now, it was just merely a light display, but back then this kind of thing was new, and it was this beautiful display of these far-reaching searchlights, and there were multiple colors, okay? And at nighttime, this thing called the scintillator would be turned on, and it would beam up these very colored light beams that you see depicted here. And I thought that was just perfect for the cover, because both the objects you see here against the black background are things that people saw while at the exposition in 1915. The scintillator would be beaming up these colored searchlights, beams, every night during the exposition. And what I'm of course looking at the book cover here. The spine is the title in the same title font with Heri's name and the Wonder of the Worlds fashioned font there. But as I said, let's let the book pitch itself first, and I'm going to read the copy on the back cover. Now, if you're looking at the back cover, what you have is, again, against a black background, you have a really colorful image of Mars, really red, orange, up in the right corner. You have a very mystical image of Harry Houdini, and he's holding a little pocket watch that I put in there. Makes it looks like he's holding a pocket watch, and he's staring out at the reader with, you know, serious eyes. And over on the right side, you have a portrait of Nikola Tesla from an old photograph, under Mars. And back on the left, just below Houdini's image, you have Charmian London, who was the real-life wife of Jack London, the author, of course, a well-known San Francisco luminary. And below her image is Jack London himself. Now, going over to the right side, we have Bess Houdini, who was Houdini's wife, of course. And going back over to the left, we're at the bottom here of the back cover. On the left, we have this stand holding a crystal. Very important crystal when you read the story. And then down below Bess, in the lower right corner of the back cover, we have what is I forget the name of the tower, but it was a very nicely designed tower that served as kind of the central structure, or you know how the Disney Sleeping Beauty's castle and Cinderella's castle serve as kind of the central images location of the Disneyland parks. This was kind of a similar thing. And behind this is from where the scintillator would beam up those colorful spotlight beams, you know, those colored light beams into the night sky. So it's really, there are photographs of this, and even though they're old photographs, you can imagine how cool this must have looked, you know, in real life. And but these images all surround the back cover copy, which I'm going to read for you now, that will describe this book. And I'm telling you, if you're wondering, here's Walter pushing one of these novels that he's published, when I read the back of this, I think you'll see why I'm so excited to tell you guys about this book and urge you to read it. Now, remember, this is the re-release of the exact book that we released originally in 2008. Okay, and we've in fact it was printed in August of 2008. So what is that? 14 years ago. Wow, the time has flown by. August of 2008, and here we are re-releasing it in August of 2022. Now, why is that interesting synchronistically? Well, 14 is the karmic number that Sesh Heri identified as being associated with Cora Stanton of the Empire of the Wheel mystery. I find it really interesting that 14 years later we turn out and to re-release this Metamorphosis book, when you consider that Harry Houdini, he has a connection to the Empire of the Wheel mystery directly through Walter Franklin Prince, who I've spoken about before, who was the rector, you know, the guy in charge. He was a reverend, the guy in charge of the Episcopal Church in San Bernardino at the time of the weird deaths going on in 1915, and he, of course, defied the practice of all churches back then, and very prominently gave this mystery woman, identified as Cora Stanton. You guys know who I really think she was. But he gave her an alleged suicide, publicly reported as a suicide. You know, you also know that I and Rick Spence and anyone else who's looked closely at the Empire of the Wheel don't believe that she committed suicide. But publicly she was identified as a suicide, and Walter Franklin Prince defied practice and policy and gave her a very public funeral. Very, very public, burial ceremony, and then shortly after that, he and his wife packed up their belongings, and before that month was over, December of 1915. And by the way, there was one more person to die mysteriously before they left town, but by the end of that month, December 1915, Walter Franklin Prince and his wife had packed up and they'd moved back to Boston, where he became the number 2 man at the American Psychical Research Association, which he ultimately, a few years later, became the head of, the director of, which he was the director of when he teamed up with Houdini in the 20s to go after corrupt spiritualist mediums and expose them and their fraud. And so Harry Houdini, of course, was in the first Wonder of the Worlds book, and he is the central figure, protagonist of this book, Metamorphosis. And I just find, and by the way, a group of women came down from San Francisco to serve as pallbearers and be involved with the funeral and all this stuff surrounding this mysterious Cora Stanton, whose alleged suicide letter claims she came from Texas, but yet these women came from San Francisco. Isn't that interesting? And here we have this book set in 1915 San Francisco, and we got Harry Houdini. So you see all the connections. So we did not do this on purpose. You're just going to have to trust me on that, because that's a fact. We didn't say, hey, let's re-release it 14 years. It just worked out that way, and it doesn't surprise me. So there's a big reason. The fact that it's written by Sesh Heri should be your first reason you want to read it. Your next reason should be the synchronicity that I've just laid out for you. That should make it a little more interesting than just another novel, okay? So let me read the back copy. And this is what I wrote back in 2008, because as the cover designer and the publisher, I wrote the back cover copy. And so let me read to you what, if you get a copy of the book, this will be printed on the back, okay? So let me get my, so here we go. It is 1915. Our world still retains the elegance which disappears after the Great War at the hands of the Nimza, the mysterious masters who have pitted 2 planets against one another in their bid for eternal dominance of this dimension. 22 years earlier, a secret journey to Mars prevented a conquest feared by a U.S. president who would be murdered at the hands of a mind-controlled assassin. As the ultra-secret Majestic 7 is formed to face the Martian threat, the men from the Red Planet mount a secret invasion, and soon our world is infiltrated. The cocky boy who went to Mars is now the world's greatest escape artist, and has been recruited as a secret operative for Majestic 7 in their fight against the Martians and the unseen Nimza. His very limits will be put to the test as he teams up with a famous writer and the woman whose love they will share. They may be in over their heads as the Martians attempt to saddle a very ancient and most destructive weapon known as the Bell, a device beyond comprehension with the power to master time and twist entire planets in half. From the heights of the cosmos to the depths of the sea and the forgotten land of Lemuria, the battle for Earth and the souls of mankind rages secretly across time and space. A hidden war, which we may or may not have won, will challenge concepts of time and reality for those who know the secrets of Metamorphosis. If that doesn't make you want to read this book, now remember, this is the same Sesh Heri who is the author of The Handprint of Atlas, nonfiction, which has fascinated so many of you, okay? And whose work and ideas, also helped illuminate the mysteries that I was uncovering with Disneyland and Latitude 33, and with the events of the whole Empire of the Wheel mystery, okay, and and on and on, and this Sesh Heri is a guy who, even though he's writing fiction, okay, it's gonna have stuff in there that is not, just typical fiction, okay? If you happen to have read The Handprint of Atlas, okay, you're gonna recognize, you know, you're gonna recognize some of the ideas and principles and concepts that he lays out there in a more technical manner, okay? And he shows you how they might have, been involved with some of these historical figures and historical events. Now, another thing is, this isn't just a fanciful tale. I mean, it is an incredible fantasy adventure, but Sesh really likes to write his fiction in what's called fantastic realism, okay? And if he suspects that something was possible in real life, he puts that in his fiction, okay? So it's as I've said before, and I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to keep saying it. I'm not going to shut up about these books, okay? I'm not going to shut up about urging you to read the fiction. I'm not publishing Sesh Heri's fiction willy-nilly, okay? He's not writing it willy-nilly. He writes this stuff based on either, it's a combination of actual history that he's done the research on, okay? But also he presents ideas that he just thinks are better presented within a dramatic format, but he suspects some of this stuff might have happened or something like it. So I mean, think about that. You've got the Nimza in here. You've got 1915, the year of the Empire of the Wheel stuff down here in Southern California. You've got the Nimza, the mysterious aspect of Nimza. Remember, those of you who have read Empire of the Wheel 3, the nameless ones, that stuff in there, that some of it, which I quote from Sesh Heri, is from this book. Okay, some of it. And as Nimza is explored and described and hypothesized in my Empire of the Wheel 3, my, the nameless ones, my nonfiction, okay, that's the Nimza depicted in here. So you get more of what, much more of what Sesh Heri suspects the mysterious Nimza actually is, or was, or is actually, is what he thinks, okay? Now, remember, even though this book, it says 1915 and 22 years earlier, because Wonder of the Worlds, the first book, takes place in 1893. But let me assure you, you don't have to have read the first Wonder of the Worlds book to read this one, to enjoy this one, and to understand what's going on, okay? If anything, if you haven't read that one, I guarantee you, you read this one, you're gonna want to read the first one, because you're gonna truly want to read it. It's not because to understand this one, you gotta, believe me, you'll want to read that first one if you haven't, if you start with this one, okay? So we have the Nimza, okay? We have Mars. You notice Majestic 7 is a precursor to Majestic 12, okay? We have Lemuria, Okay, we have time and space, and wow, we have the bell. Okay, the bell in this. So, you get a little of Joseph Farrell's science influencing this thing. I mean, this is one hell of a book, and folks, yeah, it's not a quick read. It's something you dive into and enjoy. Okay, you actually, I'm not going to say it's not a quick read. You might be so absorbed in this thing that you tear through it, but it's 487 pages, 6 by 9 format. It's not like a small paperback. I mean, this thing is, you know, this is the real deal. It's nicely printed. I like putting the. This is a little publishing thing, but it's easier to when formatting these things to put the page numbers at the top center. But that's a little technical thing, and so But I, I'm telling you, this book. If you're interested in the things I talk about, if you're interested in anything I've shared with you about Sesh Heri, if you've read Handprint of Atlas, or if you happen to have, long ago got your hands on the first book, Wonder of the Worlds, and have read that, my gosh, if you've read any of this stuff, if in reading my nonfiction, you have gotten something out of the input and the influence on my research and the impact on my research that Sesh Heri's ideas, okay, and his knowledge and his hypotheses, you know, if that interests you at all, okay, trust me, his fiction. Even if you don't think you like reading fiction, I don't read a lot of fiction myself. I'm very particular. I'm like you guys. I'm very picky about the fiction I read. And yeah, ironically, I write fiction, but I know a lot of fiction writers that are that way. But if any of this stuff, interests you, believe me, his fiction you will find to be different. All right? If you're interested in his stuff, trust me on this, you're going to want to read his fiction. And this is the first trilogy, his first fiction that we published in a trilogy. And this Metamorphosis, as I said, is the big central middle, the meat of the whole thing. It's the longest book of the three. The first one, Wonder of the Worlds, the one that takes place in 1893 when Tesla, Mark Twain, and young Houdini go to Mars. That one, as you know, is going to be released as the first hardcover release from my company. I'm very excited about that. We're approaching the 20th anniversary of Lost Continent Library. I'm very excited that the first hardcover book I'm going to be releasing is the re-release of Sesh Heri's first novel, Wonder of the Worlds. And this re-release of Metamorphosis and its follow-up, which I also have right here, and I'll talk about that in a different, a different episode, so to speak. That's the Lost Pleiad, and I'll tell you about that one in another episode. But I can't say enough about how much you'll like this book. And this isn't just a bunch of, lighthearted fantasy. There's some serious drama in here, and there's this one section, folks, near the climax of the novel, of a vision that Houdini is shown of the future, that it's some really dark stuff. And I think the things in this book have an impact. Let's say they offer a reflection, a very accurate reflection of our times, okay, and maybe things to come in our times. That's certainly how it's presented in here, and it's a must read. Metamorphosis by Sesh Heri. If you're interested in this stuff, it's a must read. But again, I mean, the mysterious Nimza, Martians, okay? time and space phenomena, um, the bell, you know, you name it. It's, Tesla, Mars. It's um, it's just an outstanding work and quite an accomplishment. And I'll tell you what. Let me see. I'll pick a selection here. Let me read little bits of the novel to you. Okay. Let me see here. Here's the first page. Okay, prologue, right side up. January 17th, 1943. MJ7 Laboratories, somewhere in the USA, 1 mile underground. Incredible. Incredible. Nikola Tesla is dead. Majestic 7's top technical analyst had gasped these words as he peered through the eyepiece of a microscope at a crystal that was set into the end of a watch fob that had once belonged to Mark Twain. "I saw him only a few weeks ago," the analyst said. "He was getting on in years, yes, but he was so full of life." Two men in dark suits stood next to the white-coated analyst. One of the men had a face that bore no expression whatsoever. The other man, the blank-faced man's partner, had an expression that was frozen in a faint scowl of suspicion, his forehead creased in the ridges of a washboard. The two men said nothing in reply to the analyst's observations. The analyst continued to peer through the eyepiece, his motionless figure betraying intense excitement. The analyst finally said, "It's one of Tesla's crystals." "Are you sure?" the blank-faced man asked. "How can you tell?" The analyst said, "I've only seen two other crystals like this before. Both of them were made by Tesla several decades ago. This one is very similar to those others." "How is this one like the others?" the blank-faced man asked. "Well, they're all a special kind of quartz," the analyst said, "infused with fast spin atoms, that is, atoms spinning at a high rate of speed. This polarizes the lattice structure of the crystal. Such quartz does not grow naturally. It has to be fabricated by growing the crystal in a special environment." "What kind of environment?" the blank-faced man asked. "We don't have all the specifics. We're still trying to duplicate Tesla's work. Maybe some of those documents you brought back from Tesla's safe might fill in the missing pieces for us. But basically, the quartz has to be grown while it rapidly rotates in an intense electromagnetic field pulsed at frequencies resonant to the structure of the quartz and the Earth itself. But it's more complicated than that. While the quartz grows, it has to be heated and cooled in an exact sequence of time intervals. It's a complicated interplay of forces, a grand ballet performed to a grand symphony." "Uh-huh," the blank-faced man grunted. "And what's that do?" The analyst slowly raised his head up from the microscope and turned to look the blank-faced man in the eye. "A whole lot," the analyst said. "But I think the thing you need to know here is that these Tesla crystals are embedded with small particles of gold and platinum group metals. All of these metals are also atomically polarized in fast spin configurations. And all of this, the quartz and the metals together, form one integrated lattice structure allowing extreme electrical conductivity." "And?" the blank-faced man asked. "And that," the analyst said, "turns the whole crystal into an etheric pump." The blank-faced man looked down at the crystal like a hunting dog pointing his nose at a duck. "Free energy," the blank-faced man said. The analyst suddenly realized the blank-faced man's indifference and boredom had been a pose. The blank-faced man had been listening to every word the analyst had said. "Free energy," the analyst said. "Only one thing. This crystal here is missing its fast-spin gold atoms." "Missing? Are you sure?" the blank-faced man asked. "Maybe the crystal never had any gold in it." "Highly unlikely," the analyst said. "To make a crystal like this is complicated and expensive. To leave out the gold would be like manufacturing an expensive automobile and leaving out the engine." "So what happened to the gold?" the blank-faced man asked. The analyst looked back through the eyepiece of the microscope. I believe it has transmuted, the analyst finally said. The gold has projected to a higher space, a parallel dimension of reality, or perhaps it is shifted in time. In time? The blank-faced man asked. Perhaps it is projected to the future, or the past. This crystal may be something like an ignition switch for a time machine. I've heard rumors about Tesla's time travel experiments, the blank-faced man said. We all have, the analyst said. If anyone around here knows anything about that, they're cleared for a level of security far above mine, and my level is pretty high. So's mine, the blank-faced man said. Well, there are higher levels, the analyst replied. Oh yes, the blank-faced man agreed. Much higher. Think Einstein knows? Are you kidding? The analyst commented. Yes, I am, the blank-faced man said. Don't you see me laughing? From ear to ear, the analyst replied. So when we get beyond the front men, who really knows about this stuff? The blank-faced man asked. Other than Tesla, the analyst pondered. Only a handful. Most of them are not part of our official government. They're private individuals that Majestic 7 keeps an eye on. Just like you kept an eye on Tesla. Alchemists, the blank-faced man ruminated. Yeah, the analyst said, like that guy down in Florida. What's his name? Lead Skalman, the blank-faced man said. Yeah, Lead Skalman. He might know something, then again he might not. I've heard he's a nut, some kind of idiot savant. He's producing results, but he doesn't really know the science behind it all. Then, yet again, he might be playing nuts. Oh, yeah, the blank-faced man agreed. If that's the case, said the analyst, you'll never get any useful information out of him, not even with torture. We don't torture, the blank-faced man assured him. Oh, of course not, the analyst said. He took the watch fob off with its crystal out of the microscope and held it in his hand. What has George Ade said about this? The analyst asked. Haven't talked to him yet, said the blank-faced man. I wanted your report first. I suggest you talk to Ade, the analyst said. He's one of the MJ7 old-timers and an original member of the Mars Club. Yeah, him and Coleman Zito, the blank-faced man thought. The only two still living. The analyst gave the watch fob back to the blank-faced man, who weighed it in his hand. What about this crystal? The blank-faced man asked. Is it dangerous or anything? The analyst replied. Without its metallic elements, it's just a crystal. Now that's the opening of the book, which obviously takes place in 1943, around the time that Tesla died. But the novel, after this intro, goes to 1915. And let's see. Let me read a little bit of Chapter 1. Chapter 1, Orpheum Time. I, Houdini, tell this tale. It is a tale of secrets cloaked in darkness, like the flickering shadows cast in succession between the bright pictures of the cinema screen. We do not see the shadows, but only feel their presence. So have many felt the presence of the shadows that surround my secrets, and have said of me, he is supernatural. How far from the truth they are, and how close. For what is natural, and what is supernatural, and what is reality, and what is illusion? Could reality itself be nothing but a flashing picture show? But I dare not pose such questions to my public, for the fake spiritualists draw a line between the natural and the supernatural construct. There a wall with a tissue of lies, and then charge the gullible admission to their false mystery show. All of creation is a mystery, and at every turn we find a locked door barring the way to the infinite. Has anyone ever found the key to such a door and used it? What would you do if you held the key in your hand? Unlock the door and walk through it to the other side? Or keep it closed and walk away? This is the tale of how I was given the key and held it in my hand as I stood before the door, a secret tale I can tell no man or woman while I live. A tale which I unfold to you now, you who live in a future time, when I have long since departed this mortal sphere, long since passed through the door, and on to the infinite worlds that lie beyond. This is the tale of how I learned the mystery of time, which is the ultimate mystery. The veil that separates the living from the dead and the yesterday from tomorrow is one and the same. It is time, and nothing but time. It is time that we see when we look out with our eyes, smell when we breathe with our noses, taste when we lick with our tongues, hear when we prick up our ears, and touch when we reach out to grasp with our fingertips. It is time that we know when we think, when we count, when we remember, and when we realize in the abstract. All we know is time, and therefore, in time, being all and everything, it seems to us a nothing. But despite this, time persists. It is eternal and indestructible. Yet we, flying souls, move through this indestructibility, thinking we see change and make change. But it is time that changes us, or, to frame a paradox, it is we who are time. The ancients understood this well. The 24 elders of the Christian apocalypse stood as a symbol for time, just as did the priests of Ceres in the greater Eleusinian rite. In the Zohar, Ein Sof represented the unknowable beginning of time. In the Mithraic mysteries, time was embodied as Kronos, a winged man with a lion's head. For as the lion devours all it surveys, time devours the animal nature of man and sublimes it. About the lion man was coiled a serpent, and in the crook of the serpent's neck, above the lion head, the serpent held fast to a golden key, which was the key to time. In every age since man has existed, some glimmering of the meaning of this symbolism has survived: the lion, the serpent, and the key. The Atlanteans held the key at the height of their civilization, but then their kingdom sank into the depths of the waters, and the knowledge of the key was cast abroad in many lands, and in those secret places it was buried, forgotten, and lost to the following generations. And ever afterward, throughout the ages, the key has been sought by both the high and the low of this earth. So in time, after the sinking of Atlantis, man spread abroad across the face of the earth, shepherded as the cattle of the field into one land after another, and throughout these ancient migrations the key was sought by the rulers of men. It was only through the migrations that the key could be found, for the key to time could only be found in time, and the movements of men were time. Thus the ancient migrations, in their darkness, arrived at the light of history. Time, which had been unconscious, became conscious as the written word. Now man reflected consciously and sought the key consciously. This conscious seeking required the drawing of lines to mark cities and states. These lines now allowed further conscious seeking of the key to time through the ritual of organized warfare. The key to time was sought in organized bloodletting, and when this seeking reached its limits, the Gregorian calendar and the kingdoms of Europe had been established. The key to time, sought consciously, could only be searched for with an artificial calendar, and this was the function which the Gregorian calendar served. The older lunar calendar, tuned to the flow of the unconscious mind, had been set aside, and this was the great mistake. For the key to time could only be found through the movements of men. It was the movements of the moon which regulated man's movements through forces reaching into his unconscious mind. This the Mayans and the Atlanteans once knew. So when the European search for the key had reached its limits, man went backwards and sought the ancient paths of the Atlanteans, which lay across the western sea. And Columbus was invented by the seekers of the key to time to discover the New World. And now the pace of the seeking increased. More wars, more blood, more migrations. More time followed. The key seemed almost in sight, but then all this increasing pace of the seeking produced industry. This had far greater effect than land boundaries or war. Industry brought man very close to the key, but it also barred his way, for it was the machines of industry that now moved, and not man. It was the machines that were now making the most time. There could only be one terrible solution, more terrible than war. To stay in the full power of time and find its key, man would have to become a machine himself. I'll stop right there on that section. But I just wanted to share with you some of what's in this book and some of the writing that Sesh has done in these works. And again, strongly urge you to give it a try. Again, if you're intrigued by Sesh Heri and his works and his ideas, if you've read anything by him before, you're going to want to read this book. If you're interested in, time travel, time and space phenomena, you're interested in the Bell, you're interested in Nimza, you're interested in the mysteries of Mars, and if you're interested in, the possibilities of what was happening in that era that Todd Wood and I have written about in The Mystery of Ingersoll Lockwood and The Curious Case of Margaretta Todd, and that we're going to be continuing in the third book in the Lost Future series, you're going to want to read Metamorphosis. Okay? It just ties in so much, and he wrote it as a novel, because he's a good writer. He's an imaginative writer, and sometimes fiction is just as good, or in some cases, it's better. It's the best way to put forth certain ideas, particularly if you think those ideas might be dangerous for you to present in nonfiction. So again, you know me, I don't just publish any fiction willy-nilly, of my own, and Sesh Heri's is not willy-nilly either, okay? Again, it's available now only at lulu.com. For those of you who are new here or new to my company, lulu.com is my printer and distribution service, okay? My company is the publisher. I am the chief editor at the company, and it's a great service. Lulu produces a very good quality physical book, and you know what? Print on demand is worth the wait. Don't bother looking at Amazon. Amazon is not a good deal for small press, micro press publishers like myself, okay? So I don't sell at Amazon. Go to lulu.com, that's lulu.com, and put in Metamorphosis by Sesh Heri. That's, you can see the spelling there in the graphic from the cover of the book. Again, go now, get your copy ordered, and again, it'll be worth the wait, and it'll be worth the time, reading this book. And believe me, you'll have even more questions about Sesh Heri's ideas once you get into this book. Okay, those questions will just start stacking up before you even finish. And again, you don't have to start. This is one of those trilogies, one of those series of books. You do not have to start with the first one to enjoy, to read and enjoy Metamorphosis. So I'm very proud to be publishing this book. I'm very excited that he wants to be back on the scene, and that I'm re-releasing these. And, go check it out. I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this, and I'll talk to you soon.